Hey guys, Henning and Morten from FlippedNormals here. In this episode, we are going to be looking at a chapter from our Introduction to ZBrush series, which is going to be some real-time sculpting for you to follow along. This is meant for people who's very new to ZBrush and doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience with sculpting. So you should be able to boot up ZBrush, follow along, and have some fun. So we're going to start off with a sphere. We're going to drag it out, enter edit mode, enable symmetry, and make it a Polymesh 3D. Right away, we're also going to convert it into a Dynamesh, which is under Tool, Geometry, and Dynamesh. If you hit Shift F, we can see the wireframe. Just we can see when Dynamesh is activated. Just hit Dynamesh, and now you can see it's activated here.
And we want to drop the resolution a little bit here because we want to block something basic out in the beginning. And having a lower resolution, it's like, we've talked about this in some of our other sculpting tutorials as well. Just the initial block out phase can be more manageable if you work lower res.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to switch to matte cap first, because this is a bit awful. Like, the problem with this matte cap is it doesn't actually give you an honest view of the model. So we're going to switch to one of the other default ones, such as matte cap gray. This is a great one as well.
The problem with the wax one that you have by default is that creases tend to look a little bit different than they actually are.
Exactly.
Give you sort of false depth.
So we start off by enabling symmetry. Simply hit the X key. And we're going to start off with the brush, just one simple brush. The move brush. B, M, V. And we're just going to block out a simple face here. Just keeping it very simple. I also prefer to, just early on, just quickly indicate some eyes, a nose, and a cute little mouth. The reason this here is simply because then I know where it is. I know where the front is facing. This is not in any way an indication of the design. So on the second monitor as well, we have a reference picture here. So we have something to look at. Just so we're not working in the blind here. So we're just going to kind of match it to what we're looking at. But we're pretty much just freestyling here.
It's always nice to have reference so you don't... I mean, I know a lot of people... I see so many posts on Facebook where people go like, well, it didn't totally use reference and it's great. Like, just use reference. Yeah. It really pushes your designs a lot further.
So just very quickly, just blocking out the form here. What I'm thinking about is pretty much the overall proportion. I'm not thinking too much about anatomy at this stage. This is not even going to be about anatomy. This is going to be more cartoony. It's just general proportion. Is he shaped like a bean? Is he shaped like a triangle? What is he shaped as? So this is probably going to be like a goofy orc character.
I remember with the S key, you can change the size of your brush.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a lot easier than having to go up to the top menu all the time.
Exactly. And again, this is just the original Dynamesh. We haven't remeshed this at all. This is simply the first initial version of Dynamesh, and then just dragging it out.
Kind of looks like a pear.
It does, but that's also what I'm thinking about now. I'm actually thinking about having like a big overall shape.
As in the beginning, it's very important not to get distracted by details.
Yeah.
Which can also be an advantage when you're working on a lower resolution mesh, because then you don't have the option of adding detail.
Exactly. I can't do it here.
No, exactly. You haven't unlocked that power yet.
Exactly.
Just wait.
I'm going to use masking and just mask out the ear bit here. So just hit down the Control key, just so it's masked. Then I'm going to invert the selection by Control clicking. And then we can just drag it out. You can totally do this without masking as well. It just makes it a bit easier for me. Now I have like a sharp line around the ear. But now you can also see now we have to remesh it because now it gets really stretched. I can't sculpt anything here. Might just wait a little bit with the remeshing.
Yeah, because there's no rush. I mean,
exactly.
You can always remesh.
So just trying to keep like a big round shape of it. I don't want to have like a shape which goes like this and which is full of like small little peaks and valleys. I want to keep the overall silhouette clean and nice. You can also just smooth out forms with the Shift key. In general, though, I would recommend avoiding the Shift key if you can. It generally produces like a flat and boring result.
I guess it really depends on what you're working on. But
Exactly.
it's really nice when you use the initial brushes and the move brush to just... They're really good for pulling out some really defined shapes. And the unfortunate thing about the smooth brush is that it sometimes has a tendency to make everything very blobby.
Yeah. And soft. I mean, by definition, it's a smooth brush. That's what it does. So I'm just really roughing, like blocking this out and just getting nice, clean shapes. And if you've seen any of our other videos, this is what we're all about. Big, strong, clean shapes. Yeah. You can hit the V key to preview the silhouette as well. That's a very useful tool. Now we can just really evaluate the silhouette and see if there's anything we'd like to change.
And this works by flipping the primary and secondary color over in the left-hand panel.
Essentially just doing this. Just moving the colors up and down here. Just changing to black. It's not a silhouette mode per se. It's simply just previewing it with black. And again, only using the move brush so far. Literally haven't touched any other brush. And that's a good practice because you can't add any details with the move brush. It's simply impossible.
The stuff we're thinking about now is also what does the structure of the skull look like underneath the surface? Yeah. And that's sort of, how does that affect when we've got skin on top?
Yeah. So we're probably going to move into the clay brush or clay build-up brush relatively soon. Just want to make sure the form here is working well. I think it's time to move into the clay build-up brush. And the hotkey is B, C, B. And like we talked about before as well, currently it's going to have a very harsh alpha. So if we sculpt with this, you're going to see this really harsh result, which might be what you want. But for me, it's just too harsh. So I'm going to remove the alpha altogether. This is going to serve the character better. This is more of a cartoony character, so having like smoother, stronger lines is going to serve the character better.
But even when working on something more realistic, working with this softer surface or the softer alpha, you'd say, is really nice because it's really effective for building up volume. Later on, you could go in with something like the trim dynamic brush to define the planes more.
I'm also going to just remesh it now, control drag, and now you see we can actually sculpt on the ears and the nose. It becomes more even. So just defining it a bit more, holding down the Alt key with the clay build-up brush, using no alpha.
It's actually a good technique as sort of an alternative to smoothing.
Exactly. I very rarely actually use the smooth brush. I just build volume. Just briefly thinking about some anatomy now, just blocking in some landmarks. This is not going to be an anatomical sculpt at all. This is going to be more cartoony.
Because we're thinking about what are the parts of the skull that protrude the most. What's covered the least in fat and the least skin. That's what's going to come to the surface the most.
Exactly. And the way you learn this is just by doing a lot of sculpts.
Yeah.
Just getting some nostrils in, getting some bigger shapes in. Like we're not doing pores or anything. A mouth might be neat though. Let's add a bit of a mouth. So I'm just carving in. Hold down the Alt key and just carving in something. A nice little mouth.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you, Martin. Keep saying encouraging things to me while I sculpt.
Go.
Oh, I will go. So when I'm working over this, I still haven't used a smooth brush while sculpting with this brush. Just getting the features in here. And also, one thing we haven't done yet is perspective mode. Hit the P key, because now you can see it changes a bit. It's not a huge difference, but it's enough to change a character.
Yeah, and we mentioned this as an earlier chapter as well, that you can unfortunately go and sculpt for a long time and then realize you haven't been sculpting with perspective on.
Exactly.
And it might change the model a lot.
Exactly. So I'm just thinking a bit more about the skeletal feature, because before it was only blocking in using the move brush.
Yeah.
Just thinking a bit more about that. But again, this is going to be a more cartoony character, but even cartoony characters would have some cartoony cheekbones. These are going to be fairly hard and rigid. We're not going to go realistic for this.
But still, it's all based on what we know, right?
Exactly.
It's based on the real world in some way. It's based on the anatomy that we know.
And then we just stylize it.
So, we're defining stuff like the brow area, the cheekbones, the jaw. Those are the ones that poke out the most.
Exactly. And we're also going to add some teeth and some eyes to this, just as subtools, because we just want that practice as well. We just want you to be used to dealing with multiple subtools.
Kind of like we did with Subtool Master, where you make one eye, you dupe it over instead of having to create two eyes.
Exactly.
And this is a good way to bring up the symmetry mode that we've been working with, because we're saving ourselves a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not always needed. Like sometimes you might want to do an asymmetrical sculpture, and that has its merits as well. And it's a good way to study, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, working with asymmetry can be a lot of fun as well. It's just, you just get so much character in your models the moment you disable symmetry.
And that's a lot more sort of like how we would work. Well, kind of traditionally. Like if you're doing a face traditionally, obviously you're working asymmetrical.
Yeah.
Some parts you would do at the same time with both hands. So that's kind of like having symmetry.
The most bootleg symmetry in the world.
Yeah, exactly. What I do on the right side matches kind of on the left.
Exactly. Go brain. So here we're just thinking about some anatomy. So this is skull, this is skull, and this is skull. Just some bony landmarks, and this is also skull. And then we have some regions which are cartilage and just flesh and skin. So this is more cartilage, this is more cartilage, and then this is soft skin. And by thinking about this, it's a very different treatment of it. It's like how would skin react if it's over bone compared to if it's over soft fatty tissue? You
can kind of think of it in the way as you're sculpting as well. Sort of the softer areas might require less pressure, softer brush. The harder areas with bone you might want to press harder on your tablet as well.
Exactly.
Oh, he just went to the dentist.
Removed all his teeth.
You know that feeling when you go to the dentist and you're just completely paralyzed in the face?
He had a little orc stroke.
An orc stroke. Butchin. And you can see, even at this point, there's still not a lot of detail. We're still building our way up to the details.
Exactly.
Because once you start detailing, I mean, I'm not talking about specific, just like poor detail, that kind of detail. Detail can come in many forms. It can be, the blocking is one kind of detailing. Doing muscles is another kind of detailing.
Exactly.
Hard, small points, that's another. And then adding pores, that's like the last part of the detailing.
Yeah.
It's all, I think you learn to prioritize when to do what. And it's just about practice.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to do this a lot. You just have to do this a lot. And then it feels natural after a while. But there is nothing so far which is complicated in terms of like technical sculpting. The most complicated thing here is the artistic aspect of it. Like everything we've done so far is 2 brushes. It's 1 sphere, Dynamesh, and just push and pull points.
I guess what's tricky for most people when they start out like this is like people will still have issues with navigation.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably the most.
Yeah, exactly. You're just not used to how to like navigate in ZBrush.
I guess maybe if you don't have 3D experience, maybe it's easier?
Maybe, yeah, it might be.
I don't know.
Because ZBrush is tricky. I mean, it might look easy because I've been doing this for so long, and this is what I do for a living. I sit with this 10 hours a day. So, if you can't get the stroke right the first time, don't worry about it. Just practice. If you can't get a model which looks identical to this, don't worry about it. Just keep practicing. This is not, the idea here isn't for you to get something identical. It's just so you can see exactly how we build a model, how to demystify it if you want.
And that's why, like, this whole sculpting process is it's slow and meticulous.
Yeah.
What we're doing now, and it's intentional for you to be able to kind of follow along.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not, when you're doing tutorials like this and you're following along with tutorials, I would say, unless the tutorial is about create this specific character, it's just about what you can take away from it. And what we want you to take away from all of this is a working knowledge of ZBrush.
Yeah.
And this is just trying to put that into work now.
Exactly. So now we blocked it out using the move brush and then a bit of clay brush as well. Let's just go back to the move brush. This is not a linear process. It's not like move brush face over. This is a very non-linear process. And also, we're kind of designing on the fly as well here. The design hasn't been decided.
And that's what's so cool about it. Once you've gone through the move stage and you get up to build up the forms, and you start with the clay build-up, you can go back with the move brush, and then you can really change your character. It can change a lot in just by moving a little bit around.
Exactly. Just want to smooth out some stuff as well. So I usually only smooth out if I actually have like errors in my mesh. If it's something like, it's not an artistic thing, it's just the geometry isn't aligning the way I want it to. Then smoothing can be great. And we smooth again just by holding down the shift key and just painting or sculpting.
Look at this tiny adorable ears.
So cute.
But
oh, look how angry he is now.
You kind of get the feel already, right? It's
This is after like 16 minutes. It's just, you know, you can very quickly get the feel. And again, if you go from a distance, you already have a feel of the character. So let's just quickly add some eyes to him here, just so we have something.
And that's something we should probably point out, that very early on you want to add eyes.
Yeah.
Because you might, you have an idea. What does the skull look like with eyes in it? But until you actually get a sphere in there, it's impossible to tell.
Yeah, because currently I've kind of like approximated it. But that's something people don't think about. It's the most obvious thing in the world, but nobody thinks about it just because you're not trained for that.
Yeah, like looking at this now, we can see that the inner part of the eye would need to be pushed in just in order to fit around a sphere.
It's like you don't think that there is actually a sphere inside the eye, like in a human. You just don't do that. So the way I do that is I just go and create a sphere. Same with sphere as before. And just hit make Polymesh 3D. Then I just go to Tool again, Subtool, and just append. Now it's going to be, this was the sphere we used originally, so now it's going to be the same size as the skull. And we can just use the transpose line, move, and just drag it out while holding down the shift key. Make sure you snapped the view. Make sure you hit the shift key to snap the view. This way you know it's going to be straight, like it's going to be a straight line. It's not going to go in a weird angle.
Yeah.
And now we can drag out a scale line, or scale transpose line, and just scale it down. You're going to have to do this a couple of times, so just chill out.
And depending on the scale of your scene, that also affects the transpose line. So sometimes you might have to scale like 1,000 times before you get there. Yeah. Sometimes it's just one.
Exactly. So I'm holding down Shift again, just to, that's wrong. Hit the W key to move into Move Brush.
And if you want to move off axis like this, you just don't hold down the Shift key.
Yeah, exactly. Want to scale it down a little bit as well. Hit the Shift key so it snaps. Drag it out. Drag it down. And it's almost in place. Now we can just use the Subtool Master like we did before. C plugin. Subtool Master. We can also just hit mirror here, or we can just go Subtool Master and hit mirror. I'm more comfortable doing this because it's a big button. Has absolutely no reason.
Feel more safe.
Feels more safe. So now we have eyes here, and we can see that my eyelids, they don't work perfectly, and they need some more refinement. We can also just hit the X key on this. By default, nothing has symmetry. So if you hit the X key, we get some nice symmetry. We can just, what I like to do, I like to just create some pupils and some irises in the eyes. This is really a quick and hacky setup. And
it makes a huge difference. Yeah, actually, like if you're sculpting on a model with no indication of iris, it can be, the model can change personality so quick.
So the way I do this is going to be very quick and dirty, is the standard brush, BST. And then I just hold down the Alt key while just sculpting a little bit here. So you can see right away it has more personality. So this is the iris. Let's just create some pupils as well. As a general tip, if you want something to look scary, small pupils. If you want to look cute, big pupils. Let's make him look a little bit cute.
And a little bit weird.
A little bit weird. But already you can see that we get more character in it. So let's, as we have subtools now, we can just Alt-click on the subtool to switch between the subtool. Or we can just change it here. I would also recommend renaming it. So that would just be head. The earlier you rename it, the better it is. It just keeps it easier.
Because eventually you end up with 100 subtools and then you have to go through and rename them all at once.
Exactly. So it's very easy to add eyes like this. BMV just to get the move brush back.
And now you can see, like, we're pretty close, but it's still an approximation without a sphere in the head, so it's never going to fit perfectly.
Exactly. So let's just, I just want some sharpness in the corners here. That's something a lot of people mess up as well. They don't have like sharp corners of the eyes. On pretty much everybody, you have sharp corners on either side, unless you're going very cartoony. Even with cartoony, you probably want sharpness here. Otherwise, if you could do like this, the eye doesn't have anywhere to.
It's not really integrated.
Exactly, and from a visual point of view, you can't really rest your gaze.
And it's a nice way to create some contrast, because we go from something very soft that surrounds the eyes. There's a lot of fat, there's a lot of skin. Except in the parts where they sort of break from the upper lid to the lower lid, you create some really nice contrast with a rough or like a hard shape.
So, it's just keeping it simple for now. And the eyes needs to work. If the most important bit of this entire sculpt is this region.
Yeah.
If the ear is perfect but the eyes didn't work, you're just in trouble.
That's what we do as people. We connect with eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's literally in our genetics.
Yeah.
You know, we look for eyes to recognize it, because there is so much contrast there.
Let's also give them some teeth.
Teeth.
And let's do the same thing. Let's just let's append the Polymesh 3D. We already have that, so we don't have to create another Polymesh. Polymesh. Here we go. We can just move it down. And let's create some asymmetry in the teeth. I'm not going to subdivide this. I'm just going to sculpt this the way it is, because honestly it probably has enough resolution.
Yeah.
And by not adding subdivisions, I can sculpt one, and I can duplicate it around, which is a big advantage. Hit the Q key to go into Move Brush. And now we can I'm going to hit Solo, just so I can see it a bit better.
And a really cool thing is that, because we're working separately with separate subtools here, anything we do on this is not going to affect the head. So if we're not sculpting symmetrically on this, it doesn't really affect the head.
Exactly. So now you can see we have a tooth.
Aww.
A beautiful tooth. Let's just make this a bit sharper. This would be more like a canine tooth. A bit like a fang almost.
He clearly didn't go to the dentist.
He should have gone to the dentist.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And asymmetry can add so much to a character. I would highly recommend looking in, like not making your character completely symmetrical. So what I'll do now, I'll just drag out a transpose line and hold down the Control key and just duplicate this around. And then we can, and this is important, you can't have any subdivision levels on your model while doing this.
Not if you're duplicating like this within the subtool.
Exactly.
You can still go ahead and duplicate the subtool.
You can duplicate here, but you can't, And then you can just rotate around a bit. And if you hold on the middle one, it's going to rotate on its own axis. And this is a bit cumbersome to get used to, but you just got to do it.
Yeah.
I want to give him like 2 more teeth. Hold on the Shift key and just to snap the view, and then Control key just to duplicate it. And do it again. And now you can see that it's being masked out, so I don't have to mask it out right now. So nice.
You really should have gone to the dentist.
You definitely should have. So now we can just move this around, just make this a bit square. And this is a nice tip as well. There is a brush called Move Topological, which is B.
It's actually something we haven't covered, but it's really, really useful in situations like this.
It's useful in specific situations where you have BMT for it, which is Brush Move Topological. So if you see here, if you move using the BMV brush, you move this, everything moves. But if you use BMT from Brush Move Topological, you can just move single items like this.
It's kind of like with when you're hiding stuff with continuity, topological continuity. It's the same thing. It's the same way.
So instead of making polygroups here and masking stuff out, I can simply just do this. I'm pretty sure that's what it's doing under the hood regardless.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, I don't know.
It works.
So when doing teeth, or fangs, or anything like this, where you have a lot of subtools close to each other, or models within the same subtool, I use the topological move.
It can be great for closed mouth or eyelids, stuff like that.
It's really nice. And for the teeth there, I just want some more sharpness to it as well. So I'm going to use the one brush we covered before. Trim Dynamic, BTD. And this is just going to give us some nice planes here.
You got to be careful with the Trim Dynamic brush when you're working on sort of points where there's not a lot of mesh in between the front and the back, because then it can sort of start to merge the whole mesh together into a weird black hole.
Exactly.
You just got to keep that in mind.
So now the teeth are working all right. You know, it's not a masterpiece, but you know, it's okay.
I think it's the best work you've ever done.
I mean, I think I was being humble, but I think it might be actually. So we can use the Trim Dynamic as well in general here, just to get some nicer planes.
Yeah, that's another way to sort of, I guess, go away from the standard smooth brush, because here we're eliminating a lot of the noise that's in between all the brush strokes.
Because you see here, right, there's a lot of noise. Not a lot of noise, there's just a fair bit. So we can use the smooth brush and we can use Trim Dynamic. Again, smooth just by holding down the shift key. So one thing I like to do when I'm sculpting is I like contrast between soft and hard. And I think that works really well. So we can have really harsh lines here where the light is going to hit. And they can have really soft lines as well. Just smooth it out a tiny bit.
That's another way to just capture your eye.
Exactly. Your eye likes contrast. So I'm just going to work a bit more on the lip here. B, M, V.
You constantly got to think about sort of how does the skull and the teeth affect the skin on top, right? Yeah. The teeth would really be pushing out the lip because they're so big.
Exactly. So what I'm thinking about as well is that in this region here there will probably be some kind of indication of the teeth, just to make it more grounded. When you see this, like these huge Warcraft orcs, a lot of times people just chuck teeth inside their face,
stuff it in the mouth,
but you can't do that. Oh, look how angry he is now.
Yeah, he was definitely at the dentist then.
Oh, yeah.
Got the medical bill. Not happy. Oh, that's nice.
Cute little nose.
It's like a freakish button nose, but for orcs. He looks super sad.
Oh, he's going to look angry. Look. Oh, now he's angry again.
There we go.
So we're still using Dynamesh now, and we don't really need to, because currently we haven't really stretched anything too crazy. So what we can do, we can just disable Dynamesh by going on Tool, Dynamesh, and just disabling it, and hitting Control D. Currently we're at 85,000 polys, which is fairly low. I just want to get like slightly more definition around the eyes in particular.
So this is kind of where we're switching up the workflow, right?
Exactly.
This would be at the point where you're going into the subdivision mode. Maybe you could remesh it if you're ready to take it to the next level.
Exactly.
But this is just, this way we don't have to worry about the topology and like masking and unmasking all the time.
Exactly, just keeping it simple. So I'm just going to hit Control D, maybe twice. Now we're at 1.1.5 million. It just keeps it, the computer can totally handle 1.5 million, almost regardless of which computer you have, unless you're from like 2001.
Yeah, I mean, I think even then.
Even then. So I'm just going to use the standard brush now, just to show you how you can use different brushes. That's B, S, T. I like to use standard brush for this kind of stuff, as I have a lot of control here. So I think
the standard brush is really underrated when it comes to creating creases and sharp lines.
It is. It's really nice for adding definition, because the clay brushes are amazing for adding volume, but not so much for adding actual definition.
I feel like you don't have as much control.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what standard brush is. That's what I use it for. So I'm just going over and just defining it. Defining where the eye actually is. And I'm holding down the Alt key as well. I'm not carving in places like this. And look at the reference as well. Like, even if you're doing cartoony orc eyes, I still have a mirror on my desk. And it's so useful.
It's like people look at you weirdly at work because sometimes when you're working on face stuff, you make weird facial expressions. You sit there, you're like, argh.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. Particularly if you work on something else as well. Yeah, so just adding some sharpness here. Not thinking too much about anatomy, to be honest. Just adding a bit of sharpness to this.
You can see the variation in our shapes as well. Sort of how the sharpness of something like the cheekbones contrast the folds going down from the nose.
Exactly. Actually, here I'm using the standard brush for this line, but I should be using dam standard. I'll undo this and I'll show you what I mean. BDS for brush, dam standard. As I said before, the dam standard brush is the best thing in existence. It just really gives you like these sharp lines. It gives you these sharp lines which pretty much no other brush can give you.
Yeah.
And when doing this, I'm varying the quality of the stroke. Like, I'm not just doing this. I'm doing slow or like mild pressure and then hard pressure and then mild pressure again. This just creates a lot more interest. So here's the low pressure and then it like goes into like more hard pressure again. So just, that's a more advanced technique. But for me, that works really well.
So the way the Damien standard brush works is that there's both a subtractive element to it, but it also pinches the mesh together a little bit to get the really nice and hard creases.
You can just go around here as well. We can also hold on the Alt key just to get like a sharper line. The Alt key will just add to it. We just give like a nice sharp line like this.
Done.
Perfect. Just a little bit more sculpting now, and then we're going to move into polypainting. Also, we can just add some asymmetry to him now. Because currently, he's very symmetrical. So the problem is when people add like wrinkles and he's like this, and he's like, oh, so angry. That's not...
Just looks silly.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to use the Clade build-up brush. BCB. That's wrong. BCB.
And where asymmetry really starts to really makes your model pop out is the asymmetry that happens in the center of the model.
Exactly.
Because if you have something symmetrical on either side, and like
the ears,
you're not going to notice that.
Exactly.
But wrinkles close to the nose or wrinkles on the forehead, the position of the nose, like pushing the nose to one side, that's all the stuff that helps sell the asymmetry.
Exactly. So I'm just doing this part here with asymmetry on. Because more like Morten says, it just looks so much more interesting. And pick your battles. Like here we have like 45 minutes just to make a model. I need to spend my time where it's useful. I'm not going to spend the time on the back here because nobody cares. I'm just going to do like, a bit of like angry wrinkles because he's really angry.
Angry. I think that's the anatomical correct word.
I'm pretty sure that's actually it.
Yeah,
it's he was definitely a dentist, so he's
anatomically angry.
And we can just use the move brush, B and V, and just, like Morten said, just add some asymmetry to this. Because why not? Asymmetry can just be incredible, just like to the eyes as well. Just like adding some asymmetry to this.
That's really going to sell. Also, you start working on something like an expression.
Exactly.
I mean, obviously, sometimes you might have a symmetrical smile. Wow, he's messed up. He was like hit by a car or something. Is this right after like a punch? To the face?
Yeah. By the dentist. And also just like some asymmetry here as well, and just right away you have more visual interest.
You can see how much he's a different character already.
Exactly.
Like story-wise, now he's been through some stuff.
Yeah, maybe he was too hard by that. Like his nose was massively displaced. But also just like see here, this ear is here kind of pointing up, and this ear here is kind of like pointing down now. Like maybe you can't logically pick it up, but your brain does.
Yeah.
Your brain can feel this.
Oh, he looks familiar now. Like a politician or something? I don't know.
So this is pretty much it for the sculpt. We're going to keep it very simple. Let's just add some quick polypainting to him as well.
It's just a nice way to make your model pop out a little more.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to make him green. Because we all know orcs are green. Yes. Exactly this color. So
we're going to make sewage color.
Yeah, we're going to make him like a little more desaturated. Like something like this maybe. And once we've done that, once we add our color, we have to bake it into the model. We do this by going to color, fill object with RGB active. And with the standard brush, BST, we have to just disable CAD and enable RGB. And then we can start to paint on it. If we want red eyes, we can give him some nice red eyes. And you can also use symmetry for this. I would actually recommend using symmetry for first pass. Hit the X key for symmetry on the X axis. Then we can just go a bit crazy.
Crazy, actually crazy. Just
woo!
That's like war paint. That's actually kind of cool.
It's actually kind of cool. So the way I like to design or like start off is it's kind of a blocking in values, like which means make it brighter or darker. Also, before we move too much ahead here, we're going to change the material to the skin shader, which is found here. This is just a way more neutral material.
You can see how much that actually changed the color.
Exactly.
So before you're previewing it with maybe a darker material, so you're boosting up the lightness of the greens. Just to think, okay, I need more light.
So we're just going to block in some very quick colors here. Just some quick colors and some quick values. And just go a bit darker and brighter, just to make it more interesting.
This is where you can fake a lot of stuff. You know, you can fake some shadows.
Exactly.
You're doing something stylized. It's fine.
Yeah.
Indicate the cheekbones just to get some more depth in the face.
Exactly. It's like makeup. Well, I assume. I don't actually know any makeup.
Yeah.
I assume this is what they do when they apply makeup.
Literally it. Just cover your face in green paint and then you're good.
Pretty much. We can also just add a color spray or spray. I'm just going to use spray. And then alpha, such as alpha 7. I mean, these are great. These just like give it like a nice speckled result.
It's nice with some randomness.
It is.
Well, it looks very dirty. Went through mud and just...
So this just gives you like a lot more variation right away. And again, the hotkey for color picker is C. C for color.
Hey, a hotkey that makes sense. Yay!
Yeah, that was probably just by chance.
Probably.
And you can see lazy mouse is on. You can see that because it's dragging. You have like a little line behind it. So if you hit the L key, you can just disable that. I don't need lazy mouse when I'm painting like this.
And for most brushes, it'll make it a little faster to work without lazy mouse. Sometimes you might want it though.
Exactly. Demon eyes. So I just want to add some redness to the ears.
You want to think about it. So where do you have a lot of veins? Where would you have a natural buildup of blood because you don't have too much fat or something?
Exactly.
So the cartilage in the ear, not a lot of resistance there. So you would have red ears on the cheeks, under the eyes. So I'm just using some colors here just to like make it more interesting. Just some blues and some yellows and some reds. You know, just to break it up. You don't want everything to be perfectly green. What? Then we can also just make this region here darker as well. Because currently it doesn't really pop out. That's again what I assume makeup to be like. We should really get someone professional in on this.
We should probably do that.
Nice.
And then you can go crazy and just like war paint.
War paint's kind of cool.
War paint is kind of cool. Then we can, let's say this painting here is done now, we can just switch back to white color, and then we get like white on the rest here, on the other subtools. We can change it to a nicer matte cap. Again, this is a pretty nice one, the default one. It looks pretty cool, but you can just go through some of the default ones.
The great thing about the skin shader is just it gives you a more representative view of your actual colors.
Yeah, exactly.
And switching back to any of the other matte caps, like it's totally legit. You can totally do that because they tend to wax material, but they tend to show off your model in a really nice way.
Yeah, exactly. So this is pretty much it. We're just going through this slowly, methodically, and regardless of what model I'm doing professionally or from personal work, this is the same approach. I'm slowly building it up using the same brushes, using a move, clay build-up, trim dynamic, Dynamesh standard, and standard brush. Just slowly building it up. If I'm doing like a high-end concept for a film, or if I'm doing a silly little work for a demonstration, it's the same process. So just take your time, do it slowly, methodically.
Yeah, the basics really can't be overlooked.
No, exactly. And you just saw how simple this was in terms of tools. The most complex thing here was probably to make the subtools for the eyes here. The rest is literally just a sphere, Dynameshed, and like 3 brushes for like the majority of the time.
Yeah.
So I hope you find this to be useful.
Yes, thank you very much for watching.